Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to, on behalf of the board of Saudi Chemical Society, Saudi Arabia International Chemical Sciences, chapter of American Chemical Society, I would like to welcome you tonight in our second workshop. And workshop is, you already know, it's very important workshop, how to convince others that the safety is important. So before going to the workshop contents, I would like to give you a little brief, though it's a long information to give the introduction, but Dr. James Kaufman, if you talk about the safety of the laboratory, he is known to everyone. He doesn't need the introduction, but still, as a part, I need to do it. So I'm just reading out few of his achievements and his, what he has done, what he is doing, and let's see. So Dr. James Kaufman is founder and president emeritus of the Laboratory Safety Institute. He received his bachelor degree in chemistry from Tufts University and his doctorate in chemistry from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. After 2 years as a postdoc, VPI with Chemical Engineering Department, Dr. Kaufman joined in Dow Chemicals. At Dow, he became increasingly involved in laboratory safety. He authored laboratory safety guidelines, originally distributed by the Dow. Now over 6 million copies in 21 languages of the widely requested and reprinted brochures are in circulation. LSI is an international non-profit center for safety in science and science education. LSI lectures and courses, AV lending, library, mini grants, internet discussion, list, publication, help both academic and non-academic institutions in 30 countries and 135 types of labs throughout the world. Throughout the world. Over 100,000 scientists and science educators have attended these courses and presentation. LSI conducts seminar, short courses, webinars, audit and inspection of the schools, colleges, companies. They also provide advice on regulatory compliance, safety program, development facilities, inspections with written reports, facilities, design, editorial commentary, and laboratory text and expert and witness testimony. Dr. Kaufman is a former member of the American Chemical Society, ACS Council Committee on Chemical Society, and is past chairman of the ACS Division of Chemistry, Health and Safety, is the author, narrator of the ACS audio publishers, courses in laboratory safety, and editor of the waste disposal at academic institutions from the Lewis Publishers. He recorded and edited the one-day laboratory safety audio seminars and two-day lab safety video courses. He is co-author of the safety in elementary and in new standards of safety in the elementary science and classroom. Well, list is long. So without going further, Jim, excuse me to stop your bio here.
Oh, please.
let's back to the business.
Yes.
So now over to you, Jim.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I always learn something when I come to these sessions. And what I learned today was that bio is too long. I'm going to shorten that so that it's a lot shorter than that. Thank you. Good. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad that all of you are with me tonight to talk about this subject, how to convince others that safety is important and that you're serious about it. Part of the introduction spoke about our organization, the Laboratory Safety Institute, and our motto, teach, learn, and practice science safely. Today, we can highlight some of the things that we are currently doing in the COVID era, and that is all virtual. And so if any of you have any interest in these, we're happy to speak with you afterwards and in emails afterwards. It was mentioned the laboratory safety guidelines, and I believe those are available for you. I think they were sent out in advance to everyone, and you got it both in English and in Arabic. And I'll tell you about some of our other Arabic publications as well, thanks to Akram Amir El Ali from Jordan. I hope you have a sheet of paper where you can jot down some of what we call action ideas. Simple, inexpensive things that can help you to convince others. One of them, I believe, is reading the 40 suggestions that are in the guidelines brochure, either in English or Arabic, and sharing it with some others. There's a quote on this slide about a stonecutter hammering away at a rock. And the point of the quote is that what we're engaged in here is not a sprint. This is a marathon. You don't convince people overnight that they should feel differently about these things. It can take time. And we'll talk about some of the factors that can help them move along faster, because we know that wind and rain can wear down mountains. And if you stay with this cause of trying to help people to look differently at safety, you may have some success over time. One of the things you can do is to watch a video. It's called Experimenting with Danger. I hope you'll add that to your action idea list. If you have not seen the video Experimenting with Danger that was produced by the US Chemical Safety Board, I would urge you to do that. It's the story of Sherbano Sanji, who died at UCLA when tertiary butyl lithium sprayed onto her clothing. She had no lab coat on. It's pyrophoric, it burst into flames, and she died. 1997. 2009, excuse me, 2009. Dr. Karen Wetterhahn at Dartmouth died in 1997 when she spilled 1 drop of dimethyl mercury on a latex gloved hand. Wrong glove. And an accident that happened in 2010 at Texas Tech when a graduate student lost 3 fingers and punctured an eye, stirring an explosive mixture. And all 3 of these institutions have one thing in common. They all called the Laboratory Safety Institute to help them improve their lab safety programs. This is a conversation tonight about improving safety programs, and I hope you will jot down questions, because we'll have lots of time for questions. But if it's an urgent question and you'd really like it answered, I don't mind being interrupted. If you can type it down and our moderator sees that there's an urgent question, we'll deal with that question. If your safety program is just at the beginning, then you're starting from scratch. If you've been at it for a long time, it's probably highly developed and effective. But how do we make it even better? And after we get to best, how do we go to outstanding? There's always room for improvement. We like to say the largest room in our home is the room for improvement. What do we mean by a safety program? Well, there are certain essential elements, but the program itself, what is that? It's a planned group of activities, functions, and practices which take place regularly to address your health and safety needs, the health and safety needs of your colleagues, your organization, and yes, also your family. Because we like to say there's more to lab safety than just labs. Here's the checklist. And this is one of the items that you can, I think that was sent to you in advance. It's the 33-element checklist for a good lab safety program. And you can use this checklist qualitatively if you like, so that you can just put a check mark in the appropriate column. If that element is okay, put a check mark in the okay column. If it needs additional work, NAW, put a check mark in that column. And if it does not exist, DNE, put it in the last column. And that's qualitative. If you want to do semi-quantitative, count how many you have in each column and try to get more in the okay and fewer in the do not exist. And if you've got real courage, and I'm going to reward courage today, if you've got real courage, do it quantitatively. Give yourself 3 points for everything that's okay. 0 to 3 if it needs additional work, and 0 if it does not exist. Now, since there are 33 times 3 is 99, and here's your bonus for courage. I give you a bonus point to bring you up to 100, and you can have a score out of 100. We also have what we call an Excel scorecard. And it is an Excel spreadsheet that has not only the 33 elements, but it also has the criteria that we've suggested for each of the 33 elements. And when you and your safety committee use that, you score on a 0 to 6 point scale. 0, it doesn't exist, 6 is outstanding, and it will average for each of these as you put in the numbers. Now, this document was not part of what we provided in advance. It's something that if you'd like to request it, I would be happy to send you the Excel spreadsheet to do this. And if you'd like, spend a half hour in a conference call going through it with you and your colleagues to just help make sure you're comfortable using it. If you'd like us to do this with you, for you, the whole thing, it takes 2 to 4 hours to do that. We can talk about that as well. I like to say that there are 3 C's for safety. And the first C is choices. Life is full of choices. I'm grateful that all of you chose to be here today, because I'm sure you're going to get a couple of action ideas that are going to make your safety program better, and therefore will help you to convince people to pay more attention to this. Lucy's the one who said this, and she's a cartoon character. She's got her eye on Linus. Here's Linus. Let's see if we can highlight him. There's Linus. And she says, life is full of choices. Right there, he's got a snowball. And he's thinking of throwing it at her. And she says, you can choose to throw it at me, or you can choose not to throw it at me. And up at the top, it says, the only persons free to choose are those who know the choices. Well, that's important. Life is full of choices, and there is one thing that follows from choices, and that's consequences. And Lucy, she explains to Linus what the consequences are. She says, now, if you throw it at me, I'm going to pound you right into the ground, and if you don't, your head will be spared. And Linus, it takes him about a nanosecond, and he throws down his snowball and says, life is full of choices, but you never get any. And at the bottom of the screen, it says, the person's best prepared to choose will know the likely outcomes. Let me give you an example of likely outcomes. Here's a picture of a rotary evaporator. I'm sure many of you have this in your labs, and it's A, glass, and B, evacuated. There are other things in the lab that are glass and evacuated. A suction filtration flask, a Duar flask, a vacuum desiccator, a vacuum distillation apparatus, a Schlenk line. These are all, a bell jar on a vacuum pump. These are all glass and evacuated. And on a bad day, they can do something bad. implode. And if they do, where does the glass go? Anywhere you like. So when I started working at Dow, all of the glass and evacuated stuff, including rotary evaporators and all the things I mentioned, were wrapped in a crisscross pattern with vinyl electrician's tape. So if it imploded, you were less likely to end up eating it. A biotechnician was killed when his Duar flask imploded. This rotary evaporator is the subject of a story that happened in the 90s. I had a call one day from the Maryland Department of Labor, and they said, Jim, what do you think about this? A young man, 25 years old, was working in a lab at the Thiokol company using a rotary evaporator. I'm wondering how many of you are in your 20s. I'm wondering how many of you wish you were in your 20s, and I'm wondering how many of you are glad you're not in your 20s. Well, he was 25, and he was using a rotary evaporator, and in the flask that he had attached here, and it was rotating in the water bath, he had a reactive material, and he knew that, so he put a shield in front of it. But when he went to take the flask off the rotary evaporator, he pushed the shield out of the way, and at that instant, the contents of the flask exploded, and the glass fragments slit his throat and killed him. 1994, Dennis Park is dead, and he leaves behind an 8-month-old child and a spouse. And John Rekas says, Jim, what do you think? And I said, I think he wasn't wearing a face shield. And you know what? He wasn't. And you know what else? It wasn't the money, because the face shield was in the room, no farther from him than the door is that you would exit the room that you're sitting in now. It was there. It was, in fact, a choice. He made a bad choice. It had consequences. It had horrible consequences. And the third C word is really a twofer. 2 C's for the price of 1. What does it take to convince people to care? The young woman in the picture has long hair. Her name is Michelle Dufault, and in the spring of 2011, she was a senior in college at Yale University, and she was a physics astronomy major. Yale is a very good university, and you don't get admitted to Yale by not being a very bright person. It's one of the top Ivy League schools in the US. But on this April evening, she was working alone in the chemistry department machine shop with long hair using a lathe, and her hair got caught in the lathe and she was killed. Horrible death. Have you ever said to somebody, tie back long hair and loose clothing? Have you ever said to somebody, don't work alone? What's the definition of insanity? Doing or saying the same thing over and over again and hoping that you'll get a different result. Well, I was sitting in our office thinking about this, and I thought, well, we really need to do something different. And what we did was on our website, if I can find it here, there it is. See if this will come up. There we go. That's me jumping out of the computer. Great. If I scroll down, Lab Safety Matters. And these are stories about people who have died as the result of laboratory accidents. And there's a series of a bunch of them that it rotates through here. But right here, it says View Memorial Wall. And what we did, and what we've continued to do, is gather together the incidents that have happened over the last 100+ years that have killed people in laboratories. And there's one from 2020, 2019, 1, 2, 3, 3 or in 18, 1 in 17, 16, and it just keeps going. There's Sherbano Sanji at UCLA. So what does it take to convince people to care? Sometimes even killing someone, having someone die, is not enough. One of the faculty members at UCLA was quoted as saying after the death of Sherbano Sanji, "I don't understand why they're making such a big deal about this. It was only one person." And I'm sitting there shaking my head and saying, wow, did he really say that? And the answer is yes, unfortunately, he did. So what we want to do is we want to talk about some of the things that help to convince people to care. And the numbers that are in parentheses here, those are the element numbers on that 33 element checklist. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the new employee safety orientation. When I started at Dow, my boss, Don Dix, spent the whole first day doing nothing but talking about safety. He did this on day one, and it was done by my immediate supervisor. Now, I know in many organizations, they have wonderful safety departments and wonderful human resources departments, and very often, one or both of those is responsible for orienting a new person. And then that person leaves there and goes to the lab where they are with their immediate supervisor for the first time. And if that immediate supervisor says, "Jim, I'm so glad you're here. We've got 600 samples in the other room that have to be analyzed by Friday. If we don't get it done, we're all in big trouble. I don't mind if you stay late and work alone to get that done." Suddenly, the supervisor has just cut the legs completely out underneath the safety program and has said, analyzing samples is more important, young fella, young woman, than your health and safety. So we want the immediate supervisor to deliver a message in addition to whatever human resources and whatever the safety department want to do. They shouldn't stop, but let's give every immediate supervisor in every position throughout the organization, including the president, who might get a new vice president, or an office manager who might get a new person working in the office, that their health and safety is really important and they need to follow the rules. Let's create a 4-part carbonless form that has the items on it that the supervisor is going to go over, and at the bottom, they sign it and date it, and the supervisor gets a copy, and the employee gets a copy, the supervisee, and then the third copy, that goes to human resources. And they're going to use this for tracking how many new employees that we hired got this done on the first day. You know, I've asked 100,000 people this question. When you started for your current employer, whether it was last month or 30 years ago, did your immediate supervisor sit down with you on the first day and talk about the importance of you following safety rules and the importance of your health and safety there? I've asked over 100,000 people that question, and only 5% say yes. I've been in groups where the number was 0 out of 250. The Midwest Association of Forensic Scientists, people who work in crime labs, 0 out of 250. Really amazing. This is something simple. It's inexpensive. You don't need a purchase order or a requisition. You just get the supervisor to look that person in the eye and say, you know, of all the things that matter with you coming to work with me, number one is your health and safety. And I don't want you to ever feel you have to do something that you feel is unsafe. Just call time out and we'll figure it out. And you know what? If you feel that I'm not giving you good support on this, you have permission to speak with my boss, because the 4th copy of this form is going to my boss, and her job or his job is to reinforce this message within the first week. Invite that new person to have a cup of coffee, to sit down and chat, get to know each other a little, and underscore the importance of that message. Now, where do you get this list of topics? That's very interesting, because here's another way to convince people that safety is important. At your next staff meeting, give out a blank sheet of paper to everyone who reports to you, or have the head of the group that you work in, if you're not the boss, talk to your boss and see if you can talk your boss into doing this. Give out a blank sheet of paper to everybody. It's really important that the boss does this, because the dog sled can't go any faster than the lead dog. Well, we want to get supervisors actively involved in this, and you give out a blank sheet of paper. You ask everyone to please write down what they believe are the 10 most important things that a new person should know about safety coming to work with you at this location, in this lab. You gather them all together. You rank order them. You make a list of all of them and the frequency, and the most frequent ones are at the top, and at the bottom, the ones that got mentioned only once. And you take off the next staff meeting, you take off the top, the ones that 80, 90% of your colleagues agreed were important things for a new person to learn. And you give one of these along with the whole list, but you assign one to each of your colleagues in the group, and you say, next time we get together, I'd like you to talk for 2 minutes on what's important with this topic. So you don't tell them what's important, they tell the supervisor, and the supervisor doesn't train them, they train the supervisor. And what have you just done? You've gotten everybody in your group involved in safety 3 consecutive staff meetings. Assignments, and the third one where you do these 2-minute presentations. And if you've got a very large group, spread it out over a couple of meetings, and then be responsible for doing this. Now that's very good. You get everybody involved. You want to convince people that it's important, give them responsibility for all of this. But you don't have to wait for the new employee orientation to start convincing people that safety is important working with you. Some of you probably interview people who would like a job in your department. I'm wondering how many of you have ever asked a job candidate the lab safety question. I had a meeting with the chemistry department chairs for all the colleges and universities in the Southeast United States, 50 institutions. And I asked them, how many of you interview candidates? They all put their hands up, and I knew that. And then I said, how many of you have asked a candidate the lab safety question? And they looked puzzled, and they looked at each other, and then they looked puzzled at me, and they said, well, what's the lab safety question? And I said, What have you done in the past that's going to allow you to effectively contribute to our department's lab safety program? You know how many of the 50 put their hands up for the second question? 0. Now, that was a strictly academic group, and maybe that result isn't entirely surprising. So at the northeastern section of the American Chemical Society, I got to speak to the 100 people that were attending before the Nobel Prize winner, and I asked them those 2 questions. Of the 100 people, 75 put their hands up. Five have ever asked the lab safety question? 2. So it's not just in academia, but in industry as well, that this is not all that common. But wait, you don't have to wait for the interview to happen. Why don't you do something bold, like when you post the ad for the position that you want to hire someone, put in the 2 words, safety conscious analytical chemist, safety conscious synthetic organic chemist. Let the whole world know that people who are applying need to be safety conscious, because I'm guessing if you want to grow the culture of safety at your place, you don't want to hire people who are safety unconscious. So after today, if you continue to hire people who don't give, well, here's my little toy. This is my rat. People who don't give a rat's you know what about safety, well, that job description. And let's put it in. We had a list of 10 things that were on the job performance review form. Do you have an annual job review, job performance review? Is there a form that's used for this? Do the 2 words safety performance appear on that form? It was on the Dow form. Guess where it appeared on the Dow form? That's right, first. So not only having it there, but also putting it there first. If it's not on your job performance review form, action idea, see if you can help human resources to change their mind about this. My boss on that first day handed me the Central Research Safety Manual. Tonight, over the last 100 years, Dow has written down all the things that you need to do to work safely in our laboratories. We want you to read this, and this is how we want you to do it. Tomorrow, when you come back, if I haven't scared you away today, please ask all the questions you like, because we've put all of our policies in writing. If your safety policies are not in writing, you do not have policies, you have something else. And I call it an oral tradition. Needs to be in writing. So, can all of you, tomorrow morning, when you walk into your laboratory or you sit down at your computer, could you pull off the shelf a book that has all of these policies, a manual, complete A to Z guide to working safely, not just chemicals, all of life's 9 hazards: chemical, physical, biological, mechanical, noise, radiation, high-low pressure, electrical, stress, life's 9 hazards, all together. Or bring it up on your intranet. You need to have it And it needs to be readily accessible. Shouldn't have to wait 3 days to try to find the answer to your question. And it should be reviewed at least annually and updated as needed. When would you update it as needed? When something happens that you don't think is the way it ought to go. I'll give you an example. This happened somewhere in the Middle East. I had a call from a gentleman who works at a research institute, and this was in somewhere in Qatar. And he said, "Jim, should I fire him?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, he took his chemical reaction from the lab and took it into the lunchroom and ran it in the lunchroom microwave." Now, beyond the wildest stretch of my imagination, this would never have occurred to me that somebody would do this. But I said, "No, don't fire him. Let me ask you 2 questions. Was there a sign on the microwave that said lunch food use only?" He said, "No." I said, "Put the sign up." Number 2, in your safety manual, is there a statement that says all chemical reactions shall be performed in the laboratory unless you have prior approval? He said, "No." I said, "Put it in the manual, and once you've done those 2 things, tell him if he ever does it again, he's fired." Okay. Needs to be reviewed at least annually. How often do your safety manuals get reviewed, and who does that? I'd like to propose a system for doing this that will help to convince people that safety is important. If you or the safety department reads through this thing every year and makes a few changes, while everybody else is doing the important stuff, the research or the analysis, you're sending a mixed message about the importance of safety. Instead, let's suppose you've got 60 people working in a lab. I'll pick the number arbitrarily because I can divide it easily by 6, and that's, let's see, if we divide by 6, it would go 5. If we divide by 5, it would go how many times? Let's suppose we have 12. Let's put 12. Let's have the lab director select 12 of the 60 people to be on the safety manual review committee and have a luncheon. Have them invite everybody to lunch, give them a copy of the manual. They've got their ticket for admission is suggestions for improving the manual. And take all the suggestions and see which ones you'd like to include in the revision. The 12 people, they get a thank you note from the head of the organization that goes in their employee file in human resources, and they get a copy of it. And the next year, you take 12 different people, so that 5 times 12 is 60. Over 5 years, all 60 people serve on the Safety Manual Review Committee. And you can participate if you're the safety officer, but get lots of others involved. Now, suppose you're at an academic institution like the King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals, where I had the pleasure of visiting, or the King Abdulaziz University. These are undergraduates and graduate students. Let's get them involved in this as well, so that they have arrows in their quiver that we call safety arrows that they can fire at – future employers. Very important. Get the students involved. Here's the hard part. Takes a little fortitude to do this. Let's make sure the rules are enforced. If the rules are not enforced, you don't have rules. You have what's called lip service. And pretty quickly, people can figure out that, you know, there are no consequences if you don't follow the rules. I can do whatever I like. And right next to the rules, right over here, you recognize this as a tombstone, rest in peace. And what rules really are, these are the monuments that we erect over the dead and crippled bodies of people who figured out a way to do something, and they're no longer with us. We don't sit up late at night trying to create lots of rules to make it take longer and cost more money. Sooner or later, if you do what those people did on our memorial wall list, you're going to get the same result and be just as dead as they are. Science is reproducible. So I think at this point, we've probably been going a little over a half hour. I think we're going to take a little break here. You can think about questions if you want. Maybe when we come back, we can do 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll continue talking about number 3, the safety committee. But for right now, let's take a short break so you can stretch and refill your coffee cup. We're going to talk now about the safety committee. And this is, I think, an extremely important part of your lab safety program. And it needs to meet regularly. I'm hoping that all of you, whether you are in an industry or an academic institution, that you have a lab safety committee that meets regularly to talk about the lab safety issues that might be of concern at your place. And it needs to have, I believe, a rotating membership, so that if we were to go back to that lab with 60 people, I would appoint 12 members to the committee. Or if you don't want to have 12, let's take 6. But let's suppose it were, you have to pick the number, but here's the concept. 12 people and 12 alternates, so that if any of the members can't go because they're ill, because they're on vacation, because they're going to a meeting, because of some other family obligation, the alternate goes. So you're likely to have a more complete attendance with alternates. And after the first year, every month, if you've got 12, one member goes off and a new member comes on. So over those 5 years, all 60 people are going to be part of the safety committee. This isn't just something for a few. Everyone participates. Get everyone involved. And there is something called a Central Safety Committee model. And this model was developed by DuPont, I believe. There is a book by James Thoman, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a little while, about safety leadership. But the Central Safety Committee is chaired by the highest ranking person at that facility. On the ground there, the person with the greatest authority. And if there are 2 groups at that location, one of them gets designated as the lab safety landlord and is responsible. And everybody who reports to that person, or if you have 2 organizations, you can do this down in each of them, the head and the head's direct reports. And they probably get together every week to talk about things. Now, They put on their safety hard hats once a month, and they become the organization's leadership safety committee, and things radiate down from there. And this gets the senior management involved. Next up is a rules agreement. And whether you are at an academic institution or an industrial institution, this rules agreement needs to be signed by everyone: students, managers, employees, administrators, everyone. When I started working at Dow, my boss said, "Jim, when you come back to work tomorrow, I want you to sign in the front of this safety manual the statement that says, I've read it, I understand it, and I agree to follow these procedures." And I wasn't a sophomore in high school. I wasn't a sophomore in college. I was a PhD with 2 years of postdoctoral experience signing the same kinds of rules agreement that you would sign if you were a student. Do you ask your employees to sign a rules agreement? I know many companies that do this, and I think it's a very good thing to do. What I've learned is that the best rules agreements have 4 parts, not 3. The 4th part is the realize. I've read it, I understood it, I agree to follow it, and I realize that if I don't follow these rules, it will cost me the privilege of working here with all of you. Students need to understand this. Faculty and staff need to understand it. If you're in an academic institution, do you have a rules agreement for your students? If you do your faculty members sign it? Do you expect the faculty to be the role models for the students? Shouldn't they also sign it as a recognition of that responsibility and the things they need to do as well? Who writes the syllabus for a course that the students are taking? Well, of course, that's the faculty member. So how about if the faculty member includes in the syllabus the 2 words safety performance as part of the grading rubric. Let's get safety performance to be part of the grading responsibility. You should provide a cover letter, and the cover letter is going to be signed by the highest ranking person in your organization, the president. To remind everybody, let's remind everybody that there are hazards here, and we're going to take precautions to protect you from those hazards. But if you don't follow the rules, there will be consequences. And this letter can lay out exactly what those consequences are going to be. We need a cover letter. And if you have a rules agreement and it's been a long time since you've taken a look at it as an action idea, I'd like you to take out that rules agreement and, as we say, renew your vows, your commitment to this. And it would not be a bad idea to remind everybody periodically about that commitment to these rules. Where do you come up with the items for a rules agreement? Same process that I was just telling you about. You get the head of the department to hand out a blank sheet of paper to everybody and say, let's create a rules agreement for our department. And what are the 10 rules that you feel that if somebody didn't want to follow that rule, you don't want them working next to you in the same room. You don't want them there. And you take all of those and you rank order them and you pull off the top what we call the conference all-stars and give one out to each of your colleagues and ask them to talk about it at the next staff meeting. And then start using this as your rules agreement. I read it, I understood it, I agree to follow it, and I realize that if I don't follow it, there will be consequences. And this is just the management version of the same thing. Here are 4 simple questions. And if you can answer these 4 questions, you can go a long way to having a safer experience in the lab. And if you can make it a habit for people to do this, then they will appreciate the importance of safety. Number 1, what are the hazards that are present? How do we recognize the presence of those 9 hazards that I was talking about? What are they, and can we recognize them? Number 2, what could go wrong? What are the worst things that could happen? And we can talk about preparing for emergencies, spills, fires, cuts, burns, and 21 that I've got on my master list. If you'd like to see my master list, just send me an email. I'll send it to you. There'll be a couple of cute ones on there also, a little fun. Number 3, if you can identify the things that are the worst things that could happen, like a tsunami, we don't get too many of those where you are, like a tsunami, what do we need to do to be prepared? Well, maybe, you know, as for, I'll give you an example. One of the things that's happening at a faster pace today, and was mentioned a couple of times in our pre-webinar conversation, is the number of people. Youssef, was there a question? No? Okay. Okay. Is that the women are becoming in increasing numbers in the laboratories. And I think it's a good opportunity for you to look carefully at the safety showers and see whether you have shower curtains around the safety showers for modesty. What's the worst thing that can happen? You spill acid all over yourself. Where are you going to go? Well, I guess you're going to go to a safety shower to wash it off. And they're in the labs, but often they don't have a shower curtain around the shower head to provide some level of modesty if you need to disrobe. One example. What are the prudent practices, protective facilities, and protective equipment needed to minimize the risk? Now, this is a poster that we have available for you. And if you look on our website and you go to the shop and you go to posters, when you get to the second page, see, page 1, page 2, here's the free poster with the 4 questions. You can download a copy of this poster for free. We'll be happy to print them out and send them to you. This is probably easier for you to just have them there, but these are the 4 important questions that need to be answered, and you can have it for free on our website. And I think there's another one there that's also free. Probably chemical waste disposal. Let me get this back. There we go. Okay. The 4 simple questions. Here's a flammables cabinet. And I was looking at this flammables cabinet in the Middle East, and I noticed that on the side of the cabinet, there was a piece of metal hanging there. And I said to the folks that I was with, "What is that?" And they explained it to me. And I then said, "Well, what else does it do?" And they said, "What do you mean?" And I said, well, to myself, well, maybe this is a language issue. English isn't native language. I don't speak Arabic here, so maybe I can say it differently. I said, "What is its second purpose?" And they said, "What do you mean?" And I explained what it was. Some of you may know what the second purpose is for it. Others may not. But I came back to the United States and I went to Cornell University and I went to Green River Community College and I went to Ohio Wesleyan University. And that's right, I also went to MIT. And I asked 100 people, what is this and what's its second purpose? Only 50% knew that it's used to hold the door open, that there's this little piece of metal that sticks up here, and when you open this spring-loaded door, this goes over that and holds the door open. So you don't have to stick your leg in there and then push it back and pivot, pull it out, and the door slams shut behind you. You can hold it open. And nobody, 0 out of 100, knew that this was what's called a fusible link, something that's designed to melt at 165 degrees, so the door will close automatically if there's a fire and it's being used to hold the door open. Unfortunately, in this lab, they didn't know what the second purpose was, so when it broke, they machined one out of aluminum, which has a melting point of 650 degrees. And so the fire will be raging by the time the door gets to close, and it's likely that everything inside the flammables cabinet will by then be involved in the fire. We don't know what we don't know. And I have gone all over the United States in academic and industrial and forensic and you name it labs, and I see these fusible links are missing, that they are broken, that they are sitting in a plastic bag on top and nobody knows why it's there, or lying on the shelf inside and nobody knows what it's all about. So the action idea here is for you to take a little time to look at all the flammables cabinets at your place, and if the doors are spring-loaded, there should be something like this up there, unless you have a different style of cabinet that builds this mechanism into the door closure itself. There is a brand from Germany that does that. I forget the name, but they're about 3 times more expensive than the others. Okay, here are some more critical components. One is a policy statement. 2, some leadership principles. 3, the importance of education and training. And 4, doing laboratory inspections. And 5, emergency preparedness. So let's see if we have time. We'll talk about some of these or all of these, and then we'll have time at the end for some questions. Let's start with the policy statement, and let's suppose you're at an academic institution. Here's a sample policy statement. It's the responsibility, I'll let you read it. You don't need me to read it to you. Here's a slightly different version that would be appropriate for a company, an industrial organization. Same idea. And it's good to have this. It's good to have it signed by the highest ranking person in your organization and displayed where people can see it. One of the companies that I visited in Saudi Arabia, we took a break for lunch, and the students said, "We want to show you something." And on the wall outside of the cafeteria was about a 6 by 12 framed picture of a statement signed by the president, the CEO, and the board of directors for safety. And that's very good. How do you go from very good to excellent? You take that same framed document and you enlarge it so it's 2 feet by 3 feet, and you put it not outside the cafeteria, but in the lobby, or in addition in the lobby. And so anyone entering the building can immediately see the organization's commitment to safety. And you want to go from excellent to outstanding. You leave enough room around the outside of this so that everyone who works in the building can sign up and make that personal commitment to safety. It's not just the highest ranking people, but everybody. The first time I saw that done was at a polyolefins company in Pasadena, Texas. The company's name at the time was Basel. It was a joint venture of BASF and Shell Chemical, Basel. They got bought by Lyondell and became, I think, the 5th largest chemical company, either in the United States, probably in the United States, I'm not sure. But they became a major player as a result of that purchase. So we need to have a policy statement, and it needs to be prominently displayed, and it needs to be signed by the highest ranking people in the organization. One lab I saw had a pull-up banner that was a picture of the CEO, and he was saying this, and it was he had like a big bubble, coming out, and he was saying this, and you could read it there, and it was his picture saying this. That was very good. There are 6 principles of leadership, and certainly that banner with the policy is great leadership. These come from DuPont, and I mentioned James Thoman before, and this is a book on excellence in safety leadership. He worked for DuPont for 30 years. They have an excellent safety record, and they're probably 20 times better than the chemical industry. The number one principle is that management is responsible, and that's why we need that central safety committee, because the buck stops here. Management is responsible for prevention of injuries and accidents and damage to health and the environment. That's a management responsibility. And it's management and supervisors that are the ones that need to be enforcing the rules, policies, and regulations. A safety officer, a chemical hygiene officer should not, in my opinion, be responsible for this. The employee's immediate supervisor is the one who says you're doing a great job, we want you to have a raise, a bonus, and a promotion, or says, you know, this really isn't going well enough, and if you don't improve, this could cost you your job. Management. Number 2, all accidents can be prevented. One needs to believe this in their heart, that if we take the proper precautions, we could prevent accidents from happening. Maybe they won't be. Maybe we won't get it to 0, but we're certainly not going to pick 6 people to be injured this year because we always have 6 people. We're going to work to drive that thing to 0. But if you do have an accident, you really do need to fill out an accident report. This is not the way to do it. You have an injury, fill out these forms immediately. This is a resignation form. Well, if you put your thumb over the word injury of the word resignation, it becomes an injury report. This makes me sick. We'll miss you. So that's not the way to do it. Training is essential. We need to have lots of opportunities to learn, and whether they are live, in person, or distance learning like this, or they are recorded online. Many of our courses are available at your leisure as a distance learning remote through our learning porthole. And there are quizzes, and you receive a certificate of successfully completing the course. We need to have lots of training opportunities. All hazards can be safeguarded. If we can identify the hazard, we can apply one of the 5 controls: elimination, substitution, engineering, administrative, or PPE. Dow Chemical had a problem at their Magnolia, Arkansas plant. They were making dibromochloroPropane pesticide. And it turned out that the males at the plant were going irreversibly sterile, no longer able to make babies because the sperm production was being killed. And they solved this by saying, we're no longer going to be in the business of making this pesticide. This chemical will no longer be here or on our menu. And they got rid of it. That's the elimination control. They didn't make dibromochloroPropane less hazardous, less toxic. What they did do was they reduced the risk to 0 by not having any of it around. We control the risk by these safeguards, the 5 controls. Number 5 in the principles is safety is good business. You know, when Paul O'Neill became the president of Alcoa Aluminum, he got up in front of everybody and he made an interesting statement, because Alcoa Aluminum was having big, serious problems. Their stock price was in the sewer, their morale was in the sewer, and their productivity was in the sewer. The only thing that was skyrocketing was their accident frequency rate. And Paul got up in front of everybody as the new CEO, president, and said, Alcoa is going to have the best safety program of any company. And we're going to have the lowest accident frequency rate. And somebody said to him, Mr. O'Neill, what about return on shareholder investment? And he said, wait a minute, you didn't hear me. We're going to have the lowest accident frequency rate and the best safety program. 4 years later, like the phoenix rising up out of the ashes, Alcoa's price was soaring. Morale was in the heavens. Productivity was sky high. The only thing that was low was their accident frequency rate. And somebody went to him and said, Paul, when you introduced yourself and your plan, did you know this was going to happen? And he said, I did. And they said, how did you know that? He said, because when people know that you care about them and their well-being and the well-being of their family, they want to work harder. People have discretionary energy. And if they know you care, they're willing to give more. But if they feel they're just an interchangeable part that can be thrown away if we break it, they're really not going to want to work all that hard. Safety is good business. William Jefferson, the president of DuPont, said that a number of years ago. And lastly, working safely is a condition of employment. This means that if you don't follow the rules, there can be consequences. And it needs to be clear at the start that people are expected to follow the rules. That's where that cover letter with the rules agreement is important, because the CEO is making it clear, HR is making it clear, the supervisor is making it clear that if you don't want to follow the rules, eventually it could cost you the privilege of working here. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to fire people, but we do need to have in place a good, progressive, disciplined procedure that we're willing to use. After we've tried coaching and mentoring and supporting people and guiding them, if they still don't get it, we need to go to discipline. Verbal warning. Oh, I think a branch just fell on one of our wires outside. That was interesting. I heard something come down. Okay. Verbal warning, written warning, paid decision-making leave of absence, and termination. And those are the 4 steps in a good discipline program. We need to have ample opportunities for education and training. Lots of them. And they might be, as I said, live or recorded, and they can happen at staff meetings. And I've given you several activities to have at a staff meeting. Let me give you another example. Ask all of your colleagues to write down on a piece of paper what are the 10 most dangerous chemicals they use in their work. And gather them all together, rank order them, and build a master list and pull off the top the most common, most frequently mentioned ones, and give one to each of the people in your department. Ask them to pull the safety data sheet for that material, and when their term comes, to do a 2-minute presentation on the hazards and the precautions for that material. And then pin up that safety data sheet on your lab safety bulletin board. Do you have a lab safety bulletin board? We'll come back to that. Do it and have every month what we call the SDS of the month. There's something called a brown bag safety lunch. And this is an opportunity to have an informal safety meeting where everybody brings a lunch and you sit together and somebody gives a short presentation on a safety topic. This was something they were doing at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and the host was providing the beverages for everyone. And lastly, there is that lab safety bulletin board that I mentioned, where you have a safety data sheet of the month, you have accident stories, you have emergency procedure of the month review, you have a safety policy of the month review, you have safety vocabulary, new words, and you have, what's that number 6? That is off the job safety, drive home the message of safety. And finally, leadership by example. And everybody who works in the lab can be a leader by setting a high personal standard and always having that eye protection on and always using the proper gloves and proper clothing and proper shoes. Well, I think this is probably a good point to move now down to here and talk about this. Effective safety programs. There are 5 things that we need to have an effective safety program. And number 1 is caring. Caring about your own health and safety and the health and safety of the people around you. I think that's why my boss, Don Dix at Dow, spent the whole first day doing nothing but talking about safety. He wanted me to care more. Safety has to be integral. It can't be something extra. It's got to be part of just doing the job right. I'd been working at Dow for 2 weeks when I turned a round bottom flask with a condenser and a calcium chloride drying tube into a Roman candle with purple flames. And this thing evacuated the whole building. We were all out on the lawn. They were looking at me going, Jimmy Jim, what did you do? The next day in the meeting room, 50 of us, the lab director said, we want to thank Dr. Kaufman for his display of pyrotechnics, but we hope he'll save this for the 4th of July. Then he said, look, we pay all of you to do 3 things here. Work safely, do your research, write your reports and patent disclosures. And working safely wasn't over here by itself. It was here, and it was one of the primary colors. It has to be an integral part. You do that, you demonstrate that when you have safety drills on a variety of subject areas regularly in your labs, not just an evacuation for a fire, but for all the other things that could happen as well. We need to have rewards. We need to give people rewards for working safely, and the simplest, least expensive reward is to say thank you. But the other side of the reward is the discipline. And as we said before, working safely needs to be a condition of employment. Repetition. We all get careless. We all get forgetful. We need regular reminders. And that's why that education element is important. That's why getting everybody to review the lab safety manual is important. And finally, participation. There's no magic to this. It's not like pulling rabbits out of hats to get people involved. The more involved they are, the more they'll care more about safety. You can make an incredible difference in your own health and safety and the health and safety of the people that you care about with the time and energy that you put into this. That's the good news. There's some bad news. You're never going to be done because, as Jacob Riis says, this is hitting the rock 100 times without a crack showing in it. You can make a difference, and it's worth it because no lesson is so important and no task so urgent that we can't take time to teach, learn, and practice science safely. Thank you very much. I appreciate having the opportunity to do this with you today. And please don't hesitate to contact me, my email address, phone number. Happy to share my cell phone number if you would like to call directly, but you call there, it's listed, it's in the voice message if nobody's there. Mohammed, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. very much for wonderful presentation, sharing wonderful knowledge. Hope we are going to get something from it and we are going to implement in our lab and in our life. There are a couple of questions written I want to read out to you and then you. Yeah. First one is, what is the best way to make a checklist of safety aspects of a chemical lab?
I'll be happy to send you a couple of sample checklists if you like. We have some of those. As you walk around the lab, you will no doubt see many of them. I know the American Chemical Society has posted on the Council Committee's website lots of information about doing this. There is a 38-page publication from ACS about inspection of laboratories. And LSI does have a publication called Audits and Inspections. And we have in there the recommendations we've made over the last 35 years of inspecting labs. And lastly, if you would like a 1 or 2 hour tutorial on doing lab inspections to teach people how to do it, we would be happy to talk with folks about providing that kind of education support.
That's great. Second question, Jim. What role can lab informatics and electronic lab notebooks play in creating the culture of safety?
Let me hear the first part. What
role can lab informatics and electronic lab notebooks?
Okay. I've never used an electronic notebook, and I'm not sure I understand really how that might work. So I'm going to speculate a little bit to try to answer. And I'm going to remind everybody that about 3 years ago, the American Chemical Society made safety a core value for the organization. And they said, you can't receive a national award without having your safety performance taken into account. And number two, you can't publish an article in an ACS journal without including the safety aspects of your work. So now let's transfer that back into an organization that has an electronic record-keeping kind of process. And so what Dow said was, before you start any experiment involving hazardous materials, you need to produce what's called a safe operating package, which outlines the hazards that are present, the precautions that you want to take, what you're going to do if it happens, and all of that. And I can imagine that using a lab informatics system, LIMS, I guess, that you can incorporate the safety aspects into any of the aspects of what you're doing. And that might be my best initial suggestion.
Okay. There's another question. Then someone raised the hand. We'll come back to that. The question is, I think the lady is from, I can read it. She's Dr. Sadia Batul. I think she's from Pakistan. Okay, could you please comment that do we need to prepare safety manual for every laboratory separately, or one common safety manual is enough for multiple laboratories working in one department? Maybe let me add my question also. If we have a department where we have the chemistry lab and life science lab, I mean, there could be same manual with addition something, or there could be different manuals.
Okay, good questions. What I would like to see is that the organization, whether it's SABIC or Aramco or any company, set a minimum standard, a standard across the board of acceptable risk for handling electricity, radioactive, high pressure, all of the hazards, minimum. And you can't take greater risk without permission. And then you give this minimum guide to all of the departments, and you ask them to customize it for the specific needs of their department, and they can make it stricter. And if you're at an academic institution, EHS does this for the institution, the chemistry, the biology, the physics department, they get it and can customize it, and a principal investigator can customize it and always make it stricter if they want, but not less strict.
Well, last question, we go to the hand. The last question is here. It's something related to the personal perception. The question is, working under pressure in chemical lab, what could be the safety valves there?
Okay, well, William Lawrence wrote in a book of acceptable risk that safety is a judgment about the acceptability of risk. And as the pressure increases and the demands on us increase, there can be a tendency to try to do a little bit more, go a little bit faster. And I think we know this a little bit when we're late to travel to somewhere, and the speed of the vehicle tends to get a little bit faster than we might normally drive it, because we want to get there on time. And we're more conscious of being late than we are of the added risk that we're putting ourselves under and others. And this is where the supervisor really needs to make it clear that we need to go and do this, but it has to be done safely and maintain our standard if we can. But I know we all at times go a little bit quicker than we should, and we may not see something that we should see. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge.
Okay, there's one raised. Prashant is there. Prashant?
Hi, Prashant.
Yes, if Jim allow, I would like to just say about the LIMS integration with the safety.
Please.
Yeah, see, LIMS is now playing a very important role in all the labs. So what is the best integration that everyone is having their work instruction or SOPs for their testing procedures or research work. So in that case, this LIMS can be very helpful to conduct their HIRA, that is risk identification, hazard identification and risk assessment, and that can be integrated with work instruction or SOP. So when actually employee is going to the SOP or work instruction, immediately he will be forced to open that HIRA. So he has to undergo that one. This type of integrations can be done. Even actually when someone is doing a specific experiment and we are doing a JSA for that one. So until and unless he is trained on the JSA, he will not be allowed to enter the data for that particular experiment. This type of lot of experiments we have done in lab and is very successful to improve the safety. So that type of LIMS, there was one question on the LIMS. So that's why I would like to add it over here.
That's good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prashant. The next hand is from Dr. Salim Shamri, please. Dr. Salim. No one, you can. Dr. Salim Shamri, your hand is up.
You are hearing me now?
Now, yes.
Okay, Dr. James, long time not hear from you, and it's always a pleasure to listen to you from time to time.
Likewise.
Okay, I have just a dream, just about developing, just some documents to be utilized during building new laboratories as a free document to judge safety violation during the constructions. Can we work together on these issues?
Yes, we can. We have some good resources that we can look to see if we can find some things that might be helpful with that. We do blueprint reviews for people when labs are being planned to look at and think about where everything is being put and some of the safety issues. There are some very good books on this subject and some courses on lab design for safety that are currently available. Yes?
Do you have something handy?
The book on lab safety design is by Gary Gatwood and Lou DeBerardinis, the safety director at MIT, I think could be a very good starting point as a reference. I can send you the citation for it. Let me make a note to send that.
Can we summarize it? Can we summarize it in a few pages?
I think we could get Lou to give us permission to do that, or he might have some materials to summarize it, the highlights.
Yeah, because it will be very beneficial, just because sometimes we cannot clinch a deal, just to resolve untractable dispute between, just laboratory personnel and loss prevention and other support organizations.
Yes, there's often a tug of war with all of this, and often when you finally get to the construction stage, they engineer out a lot of the safety precautions that we tried to put in.
I agree.
Okay.
That's all from my side, Dr. Mohammed.
Okay, thank you, Abu Dalal. Jim, there's another question. Is there a way to assess and measure the level of safety implementation in labs?
Yes, I think our 13-element checklist would be a great way to do it, or the Excel scorecard that I mentioned that I'm happy to share if anybody would like to send me an email to request it.
Okay, there's another question, and I think, hi, this is Kurtaline Nadeem talking about safety. We have a number of plans to be tackled. Where to start first? Such as we have risk assessment, COSHH, manual handling, etc. Kindly elaborate. I mean, they just want to know from where to start. What is the starting point? What should be the starting point?
There are many paths to the top of the mountain. And I don't know that one is necessarily better than the other. I think starting anywhere and get on with doing it, understanding the fundamentals. We have a book called Prudent Practices in the Laboratory, published by the National Research Council. and it is about a 300-page book, and you can have it for free. And it is available online at the National Academy Press website. And you can go there and you can download the PDF of this, and you can print out copies of it for yourself from
Yeah.
that website. And every 2 weeks, we have that's it. Thank you, Prashant. That looks like the second edition. That's the 1995 second edition that he's holding up. There is a third edition from 2011. Both of these are available for free online as the PDF. And so every 2 weeks, we are having a round table discussion about this. And you can join that round table discussion for free. If you go to our home page and you scroll down just a little, it says live discussion. And we are going to be discussing chapter 9 in this book on the 9th of October, Friday the 9th of October at 1 p.m. So it won't be from 1 to 2. It will not be too late for all of you if you would like to join for free. Read chapter 9 so you're familiar with what we're going over, and join the conversation. And hopefully speak up and ask questions. And all of the previous sessions have been recorded, and they are on our website on the resources page here. You can download them. If you can listen to them, probably download them, I don't know.
Excellent. That's good information. I think people can visit this LSI website and they can get a lot of information there for free. Next question, Jim. Thank you for such an informative session in safety. Can you comment how important is chemical waste management? Can play a role in following the safety protocols, or how much chances are there for hazards?
I'm not sure I understood the role of
Chemical waste management, actually they are talking about.
what kind of management?
Chemical waste.
Chemical waste management.
Yeah.
Yes, that was the subject of last week's topic. Chapter 8 was on chemical wastes. And it is important to make sure that the wastes are handled properly. We don't want to end up poisoning our own environment and end up drinking this in our drinking water for years. We saw a bad example of this in Flint, Michigan, where they had a very high level of lead poisoning in their water. We need to do proper waste disposal, and happy to talk more about that at some point, and maybe have a webinar in the future on chemical waste management.
I think the next question is a repetition. You already answered. I mean, this person is asking, do you agree that one safety size fits all approach to chemical labs scenarios? This is what.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it has to be right, and I don't try to be prescriptive for everyone and try to fit everybody into the same size. It has to depend on where you are and the people you're working with, and just have a goal. We want to do better. Wherever we are, let's start. And wherever we are, let's just see what we can do to make it better. That's the nice thing about that Excel scorecard, is it helps you to see a path to improvement.
Last question. I mean, it is a following up what you suggested. So he's questioning here. You mentioned that about the safety education to be delivered by university management or supervisors to new students, or let's say new employees. what's the data sheet or study materials for new graduate students that he can study and adopt by himself?
What can a grad student study by himself?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I would start by giving the grad student a copy of the two things: a rules agreement for working with that principal investigator, if the grad student is working with a principal investigator, the rules agreement, and the lab safety manual for the institution and for the work, and study the SOPs for that particular department. I would start there with what the way they like to see things done in their department.
Well, now floor is open. Anybody has any question, or we may move to the last part? We don't see any hands here. No questions are there, Jim.
Okay.
So I would like to invite our society chair, Dr. Bashir Chand Basha, and he may like to say a few words about today's workshop, rather tonight's workshop, and your efforts. Dr. Bashir.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Nahid. Thank you, Dr. Jim. And then it was on behalf of our BODs, Saudi Arabian International Chemical Science Chapter of ACS. I express my sincere appreciation for your inspiring presentation today. And all of us know that actually you are a very good, excellent educator. Your presentation cover very depth understanding on the importance of safety, with several examples you shown us today. And actually it's very useful for us. And thank you for taking your time to share your insights, yeah, for our safety to our society members. So not only that, we are organizing conference, you know, that next year, 2021 in November, the conference called First Gulf Chemistry Association Conference in Bahrain on 16 to 18 November 2021. So if you have time, please join the conference. Also for the members attendees today, so the conference abstracts still open. You can submit your abstracts for the conference GCA 2021. There are a lot of awards for the presenters also. Thank you, Jim, for your time.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I hope a lot of people are going to contact you privately to get their information, to get the more information about the LSI, and maybe they may have some inspection, virtual inspection through the LSI. So get ready for that. And this is the conference, you are part of it. You are offering a course, Jim, in G.
Yes.
Yeah. So as Dr. Bashir said, I mean, it is going to be next year now. The abstracts submission is still open. So we invite everyone, and you are also invited to share this information to your friends, colleagues in US, and hopefully we are going to get more submissions from the West.
Good.
During the conference, one of our instructors.
Yeah. Yes, Prashant.
During the conference, Dr. Jim is one of the instructor of one of the course.
Yeah, this this is what I said before also. So again, I would like to thank Prashant, because Prashant, he took the route for us to reach you. And thank you very much, Prashant, and thank you very much, Jim, and thank you all for attending this workshop. And with this, we are closing it. Thank you, and good night here in the Gulf, and good afternoon there in US, Jim. Take care.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much.